Live, trance, and prosper. Hi, I'm Dr. Brian David Phillips, and I'd like to talk to you about the Monroe sequence, also known as the Monroe activation sequence, also known as the activation sequence, also known as the motivated sequence. This is an approach to persuasion. Entire books have been written on the process and techniques of influence or persuasion. If you're familiar with my web pages at www.briandavidphillips.net, you're aware that I have produced many videos and actually have courses you can take on social influence or waking hypnosis and other areas of persuasion and influence. I also teach communication at National Zhengzhou University, a top-tier university in Taiwan, and I cover this material, as well as teaching the critical thinking course at the Hypnosis Practitioner Training Institute, which incorporates social influence as well as critical thought. Now, there's a lot out there. We're going to specifically look at the motivated sequence here. It's known as the motivated sequence because essentially that's what it does. This sequence, the Monroe activation sequence, was created or developed by two university professors of speech and communication, Alan Monroe and Douglas Inninger. And essentially, the motivated sequence has 5 steps. Now, in this short video, you will learn about these 5 steps, and you will learn the logic behind them so that you can incorporate them in your own persuasive speech and communication. Now, the motivated sequence, what is it? Well, according to Alan Monroe and Douglas Inninger, there are 5 steps in the persuasive process. These are the attention step, the need step, the satisfaction step, the visualization step, and finally the action step. Those 5 steps in sequence allow you to motivate others toward change or action. Now, the basic idea behind the 5 steps is that you must give your listeners a reason to change an idea or behavior or to adopt a new one. In other words, you need to motivate that person. How do you motivate someone? Think about yourself. What motivates you to clean a room or start an exercise program or drive more carefully? Now, in some instances, it's fear. Okay? A finicky friend may be coming over and you don't want them to see your dirty room. All right? A doctor's warned you about health issues that exercise will help clear up. Or you had a near-death experience on the highway. And so that's motivated you to, drive more carefully. Fear is a very powerful motivator. Now, in other instances, it's not so much fear, but positive rewards that motivate you. For instance, you may enjoy making your surroundings pretty. Or you want to fit into a new pair of jeans or that really sexy, pretty dress. Or a new shirt or suit. You want to look good for some reason. Or you really want your insurance rates for your car to go down and know that a safe driving record is going to drop that cost. All right? Now, those are positive rewards. Negative and positive rewards are both ways of reinforcing behaviors. It's based upon the very simple concept of toward and away. Essentially, humans move toward pleasure. If it feels good, I want more. and away from pain. If it hurts me or if I'm afraid of it, I want to move away from it. So those are two very basic ways of motivating folks. Now, in the motivation sequence, you create that motivation toward whatever the context of the presentation is, and you get people to move forward. Whether we are motivated through positive or negative means, the motivated sequence provides an organized system for approaching persuasion. Now, let's consider the logic of each step. The attention step. Now, this is the first step in the sequence, and essentially it's important in capturing the audience's immediate interest and attention. Okay? This is because if you don't get the audience's attention, ta-da! And see other videos I've done on organizing presentations on some attention-getting strategies, if you don't get their attention, you're not going to motivate them to do anything. No brainer, right? So, get their attention, okay? Otherwise, you're not going to achieve your goals, because if the audience doesn't have their attention, you don't achieve your goal unless they want to hear more. So, boom, get that. Need step. Now, this is one of the most important steps in the motivated sequence. In this step, you give the listener a reason or a set of reasons to accept your message. The need usually takes the form of one or more problems. Presenting a problem alone will not guarantee a successful need step. The listeners must identify with the problems, and in some way, listeners must feel a personal involvement. Sure, you could give a speech or a presentation about a charity, and you might say something along the lines of, "These kids are starving, and they need your help." But that's not really a motivator for the audience. You need to connect them emotionally to needs and show them what they'll get out of it. What do they need? And there are ways of doing that with the positive and negative reinforcements. Now, according to Abraham Maslow, there are 5 basic human needs. Okay? I've talked about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs elsewhere, or the motivators, and you can go ahead and check the description of the video below and click on the link to that talk. Essentially, Maslow says we can organize needs or motivators like a pyramid. It's 5 stages, and people essentially want to fulfill the stages in order. And so we don't really care about the higher order needs or motivators unless we've already got the basic ones. And the basic ones are physiological or biological needs, the needs you have to survive, the things that keep us alive. And then we've got our security needs. That's our needs for safety, so that we feel safe in the world and in the lives. And then we've got our social needs. That's our needs for belonging to a group. And then esteem needs, how we feel good about ourselves. And finally, self-actualization right here, boom, at the top. That's be all you can be, to realize your full potential. Those are the needs. And you can check out the Maslow talk in another video in my channel, and you can order it elsewhere. But essentially, you present the need step, you present the needs framed within motivators for the audience, and those motivations are based on what the audience needs, not necessarily what you need. A huge mistake young people often make when they're interviewing for their first job, fresh out of university. A very common interview question is, "Why should I hire you?" And they immediately come out, "Well, I need a job. I've got to pay rent and I need money." That's not really going to do it, remember? That's maybe what you need or what I need, but it's not necessarily what the employer needs. So you've got to show how you satisfy the needs of others or the needs they have that are then the next step, step 3, satisfaction step. And after you've presented your needs, it's important to tell the audience members how to eliminate or reduce that need. And this is done through the satisfaction or solution step. In this step, you clearly identify the attitude or behavior you want to change. Okay? Now, in most advertising, it's a simple message. Buy our product. Now, in a speech, it usually involves suggesting a plan of action or behavior or alternate behaviors, okay? Such as exercising 15 minutes a day or meditating 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening, or whatever is appropriate for the context of the presentation you're giving. And context is important. And this motivated sequence, this 5-step approach to influencing folks' attitudes and behaviors, it works for many contexts. It can be religion, it can be politics, it can be commerce or business, and it can even be social needs. And yes, that includes romance. It sounds creepy when you say it that way. I'm structuring a 5-step plan to get a date. But we do this automatically. We do this naturally. It's just Ehninger and Monroe have set up a sequence that allows us to think things through more comprehensively so that we can structure our message more appropriately and more effectively. Now, once you've got that satisfaction step, we go into step 4, the visualization step. As most folks watching this video know, especially if you know my blog, briandavidphillips.net, and there's the link, I am a hypnotist. Okay, and I teach hypnosis. I also teach social influence and social psychology, amongst a whole bunch of other stuff at the university level and elsewhere. All right, but visualization step isn't quite the same as the guided imagery meditations we do as hypnotists. You don't have to go, now breathe in, breathe out, close your eyes and relax and imagine. Sure, some folks do that. I've actually heard PSAs that did that very well. It was very amazing. But the visualization step is really about visualizing and getting the audience members actively connected to the imagination. This step helps the listeners understand how the solution works. If you're trying to convince someone to buy a personal computer, the visualization step would explain everything that the computers can do in connection to their needs and how it affects or changes their lives. You would be able to help your listener picture using it for writing reports or balancing the family budget in this step. Essentially, in this step, you explain how the solution eliminates the need through vivid language, preferably sensory positive language. Really get the senses, the 5 senses and more, involved in how you get them involved. And if you understand neurolinguistic programming, you may be aware of the different channels for learning, auditory, kinesthetic, and visual learners. And so if you know how the person relates to the world, you use that kind of language as appropriate. But essentially, the visualization step is an important step because an audience member, an audience should be convinced that the solution actually satisfies the need, their personally involved need. Now the next step, boom, step 5, that's our action step. And that's the final step that informs listeners how to implement the solution. If you're trying to persuade everyone to write to members of the National Assembly in favor of a certain resolution, you would give specific information about contacting the National Assemblyman that you want them connecting to. You'd give the names and addresses and how best to write the letter. The action step provides a way for the audience to carry through with the solution. It makes it appear that the audience can influence the needs. Now, unless listeners believe they personally can do something, they're less likely to change attitudes and behaviors. Also, if you get them to do something at the time of the presentation, no matter how small, you activate what Robert Cialdini calls the consistency influence law. And that is, if someone has verbally said what their values are, or they have done something previously, they're more likely to follow through later. So even a symbolic action can move them forward in changing attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviors. Now, there are other persuasive models. The Monroe motivated sequence, or the Monroe activation sequence, is not the only model you can use for constructing a persuasive or an influence-generating speech. Many speeches will add or omit steps in their development. This happens to be one of many models for persuasive speaking that you may turn to. Okay? Due to its uncomplicated nature and more readily understood rationale, it is often more immediately usable by both beginning and advanced speakers. Now, as you go through this activation sequence, you need to decide on whether you're using direct or indirect approaches in persuasion. Your goal may be, for instance, to get your listeners to recognize that a problem which they wish to ignore, for instance, like the existence of some form of discrimination, actually does exist, and to a significant degree, and that it is somehow harmful to them as well as to those who are more obviously affected. Or you may wish to urge adoption of a particular solution to a problem of which the listeners are well aware, like some aspect of the pollution or energy crisis or climate change, in which the suggested solution, your thesis, although advantageous overall, will involve some inconvenience or financial sacrifice, okay, or other unpleasantness to the listeners as individuals, okay. If the desired inconvenience, or the desired, not the desired inconvenience, my English is so good. If the desired improvement is to be achieved, then they're going to have to pay in time, effort, or inconvenience. All right? Now, in those cases, you might use what's called an indirect opening. You use a subtle approach to persuasion. Whereas if the listeners, remember demographics and psychographics from a previous talk, I'll put the link in the description. If they're already predisposed to follow through with your activated sequence of change in behavior, attitudes, or values, then you can use an overt approach. But make sure you know the demographics and psychographics of your audience so you know if you need a direct or indirect approach to influence or persuasion. You also might want to hang on to the concept of positive suggestion. My friends who are trained hypnotists understand this very clearly. Make maximum persuasive use of positive suggestions at every stage of preparation and presentation. Avoid negative suggestions. Remember, you're responsible for the implications of the words you choose to use. There it is. The Monroe activation sequence and how to apply it. I hope you found this useful and that you become a more effective persuader. Go ahead and check out my web pages and check out the other material on social influence and social psychology on that site. And if you like, feel free to buy my products. You don't have to. There's a lot of free stuff on my site. That's the motivated sequence or activation sequence for Alan Monroe and Douglas Enninger. This has been Dr. Brian David Phillips, and I'd just like to say, live trans and prosper. Bye-bye.